Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, thanks so much for returning back to the Gonez show. How are ya?
Very well, Brandon. It's great to be back.
Well, I'm so glad to have you. I wish we could have done this in person, but I'm still so happy that we can talk right now because there's a lot of big issues to talk about.
Absolutely. You know, I think we're all looking forward to getting back to as many in-person things as possible, but because for that, we need to end this pandemic for good. And that's what I'm focusing on.
All right, so let's start talking about things that we need to talk about. And by the way, for our viewers, just so you know, Mr. Trudeau and I did talk before we started filming. He said I can call him Justin. You know, this is a talk show, so we want to feel relaxed. We want to feel comfortable, but we want to get some answers. So first off, I just want to check on you because I've been seeing some videos on the campaign trail. People are getting a little bit aggressive. Some rocks, you know, things were thrown at you. That's not okay. I've never seen that before. How are you doing with all of this?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm a fighter, and I'm going to fight for Canadians every single day. It's not about me, actually. It's the fact that we have healthcare workers going into work late at night on shifts who are being hassled by people in the street. We have, people in shops. We have waitresses being yelled at for demanding people wear masks. There is a really nasty undercurrent in a small minority of Canadians. The vast majority of people are doing the right thing and sticking up for each other. Those are the focus I'm focused on.
Alrighty, well, I'm glad to hear you're doing okay. So let's get into the policy stuff because listen, we put out some questions to our viewers. We've been hearing from them nonstop, and there's a few big issues that they want us to talk about. One of the big things is affordability. I mean, you look around the country, groceries, gas prices, up. The big one, housing prices, right? And I know you and the Liberal team came up with a really big plan to tackle that. And I want to talk about that plan because it's one of the bigger ones when you compare all the other parties. But I do have to ask you, I mean, you've been in power for 6 years, right? And during those 6 years, real estate prices have climbed dramatically. Why didn't you tackle this issue during those 6 years?
Well, listen, I'm glad to be able to correct the record right off the bat. We did, and we have been. We have moved forward with, from 2017 onwards, a national housing strategy that's up to about $70 billion of investments to do things like build more social housing, fight chronic homelessness, and increase home affordability with things like the first-time home buyers plan that makes it easier to get your down payment and easier for your mortgage payments. So there is a lot of things we did, but you're absolutely right. Housing prices continue to rise. So in this platform, as you said, we are doing more and proposing more than any other party to go at the housing prices. Just a quick and easy contrast, the Conservatives are offering $500 million to help wealthy landlords sell their buildings. I don't know how that's supposed to help families, particularly young families, buy a home, but that's what they're doing. What we're proposing is actually recognizing that there's no one answer. Every family is in a slightly different situation. Some people want to rent, some people need to do other things. Different parts of the country have different challenges. So we're doing three big things. First of all, we're making it easier for people to save up for a down payment with benefits that are worth tens of thousands of dollars towards a tax-free savings account that'll help particularly young families put down for their first home. We're also bringing in a rent-to-own program. So as you rent, you can be putting aside some of that money towards a down payment within 5 years to be able to own your home, which is a really innovative thing that has worked in other parts of the world. So that's the first part of things we're doing. There's a lot more little details in there, but that's the big one, helping people afford and get into that first home, particularly young people. The second thing we're doing, we know we have to increase supply. So we've got $4 billion going towards municipalities to incentivize them to build more units, to refurbish more housing. We're talking about 1,400,000 new homes over the coming, new and rebuilt homes over the coming years to help take that pressure off on the supply side. And the final thing is we're hearing all about real estate speculation. We're hearing about unfair practices that are harming first-time home buyers. It's not right that you should lose 20 bidding wars when you're trying to buy your first home. That's why we're going to crack down on unfair practices like blind bidding. We're going to reduce house flipping. We're going to make sure that foreign money coming in to park in homes that aren't being used gets banned. These are the kinds of things that are going to stand up for home buyers' rights. There's lots of different things we're doing because it is a multi-layered problem, but we are addressing this housing crisis.
It all sounds good. I'll be honest with you. It sounds good, like you're tackling different segments of people who are in different situations. But if you were to be reelected, how quickly would you implement this plan?
Oh, there are already things that we've been working on that we put forward in budget 2021. So just a number of months ago, these things are already underway. One of the nice things about being in government is you get to know how to do things and how to deliver things very quickly. And we'll be able to get to work on ending the pandemic and building back better on day one after the election.
But this Bill of Rights, though, for home buyers that would, ban blind bidding, that happens, that would ban foreign investors from buying homes for the next year. How quickly would that be implemented?
There are things we can do almost immediately with regulations. There's other things that would need legislation. And that's sort of a good point, that as soon as you start having to legislate, things get slowed down a little bit. That's where we saw it happen time and time again in the past Parliament, where people would block, people would filibuster, people would delay, because, quite frankly, for an opposition party, not having a government deliver good things for people is sometime in their advantage, even if it's not in the advantage of the people we're all trying to serve. So we're going to try and work as quickly as possible and make sure that there is clarity in the outcome of this election so that people can actually get the things they need done by Parliament quickly.
We've been focusing a lot on people who want to get into the housing market, but for people who are already in the housing market, word on the street has been that your government would potentially tax principal residences. I just need to know true or false. Is that true or false?
That is absolutely false. And it's a perfect example of the kinds of scare tactics and misinformation that other parties use. I mean, Mr. O'Toole actually said in the debate, yes, it's on page 14 of your platform, Mr. Trudeau. Actually, what's on page 14 of our platform is a number of measures, but the one he was talking about is we're going to bring in a tax on home flippers. So if someone flips a home they buy in less than 12 months, they don't get all the advantages that someone who has owned their home for a number of years do. And we're bringing in exceptions. If you
What does that tax look like? How much? What's the percentage?
Well, it just makes sure they don't get the same advantage treatment of someone who is in their home for multiple years. We're seeing people flipping homes regularly as a way of making money, and that's driving up prices for everyone else. They shouldn't get the same kinds of advantages of someone who sells a home that they've lived in for years.
Okay, all right. We got to talk about another hot button issue, which is the COVID-19 response, and we got to clear something up. Justin, last time you were on my show, all right, we talked about COVID-19 and you told me verbatim that Canada is not a country that makes vaccines mandatory.
We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory, for example, but we want to encourage everyone to get it.
Yet here we are, and we've seen you out there preaching about mandatory vaccinations for federal workers. I mean, it feels like a switch up, especially when we're also hearing you preach about mandatory vaccination passports. Why the change?
We will never force anyone to get vaccinated. That's not the Canadian way, and that's what I told you. However, if people make the choice not to get vaccinated, there are going to be things, privileges that they won't get to do because they would be putting at risk people who have done the right thing.
But including their jobs?
Imagine a situation where you have a family taking a vacation for the first time in a long time, flying south. You have your 7-year-old kid with you, sitting across the aisle or maybe in the seat next to someone who you don't know whether or not they've been vaccinated. putting your kid at risk when you did all the right things, when you chose to get vaccinated, like almost 80% of all other Canadians. There are enough vaccines in this country for everyone to get vaccinated. So there's no more equity issues. We need to encourage people who don't get vaccinated to get vaccinated. And that means vaccine passports, means non-essential services like restaurants or bars or gyms or movie theaters. You might not be able to go into them.
But what about people who are being told that they might not be able to come to, like, lose their jobs? They may lose their jobs if they choose not to get vaccinated. How is that fair to those people who genuinely might have some concerns? I think about maybe people of color who have a historical concern. Historically, they've been used as guinea pigs. I'm talking black people. I'm talking even Indigenous people. There is legit concern about there that people might just need a bit more empathy, a bit more information, and it seems like their livelihoods are at risk if they choose not to make this choice.
Do you know what puts livelihoods at risk? COVID. Do you know what put livelihoods at risk? More lockdowns, more shutdowns. The emergency rooms in the country right now, the intensive care units, are filled to overflowing with unvaccinated Canadians right now, people who chose not to get vaccinated. Now, over the past many months, as a government, we have been working with community leaders, with nurses from the Black community and Black doctors, and with minorities across the country to share in language, to reassure, to educate, to put out local vaccination drop-ins around the corner from people's homes in well-known community centers, in places that can encourage people to do the right thing, because that's what we need to do. And yes, we are doing all the encouragement, all the education, and that's going to continue. But at the same time, people need to understand that their choice is theirs. But if they choose to put other people at risk, that means they're not going to be able to do some of the things that people who are choosing to look out for each other, are choosing to do the right thing, will be able to get back to.
All right. I want to talk to you about that more, but we have so many other topics that we have to get to. And I want to move on to, systemic discrimination and racism. You've been very vocal about that. I've read your platform back and front multiple times. The word systemic racism is in there. Black people, those words are in there. I can't say the same for Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives platform. I'm going to be honest. So kudos to you, and kudos to where kudos deserve to be given. But I do want to talk about the massive class action lawsuit that has been filed against the federal government by Black federal employees who've detailed years of awful discrimination. That is happening right now. I haven't heard you address that or recognize that lawsuit. Will you do that right now?
Oh, no, I recognize that lawsuit, absolutely. And it's
Will you certify it, though?
It's part of that is a decision to be made by the courts. And one of the reasons I haven't commented on it a lot is I don't talk about things that are going through the justice system. That's not right for politicians to do. But I will remind you, and actually you remember this, ours was the first government to recognize the UN decade of people of African descent. We've recognized Emancipation Day. We were the government that actually recognized first systemic discrimination, unconscious bias, anti-Black racism. Those words had never been used before a number of years ago when we put it forward. But we didn't just use the words. And I know that's what you're reflecting on, this words, where are the actions? Well, we stepped up, not with us to say what we needed. We talked to the Black community. We talked to Black community leaders about what is necessary. And quite frankly, some of the things that we expected were there. We need to do more on banning mandatory minimums, which we're moving forward on. We need to do more to make sure that the justice system is fair, because the incarceration rates of Black Canadians is way too high. So we're doing more there. And those are the things that sort of everybody knows. But what I learned from the community was more interesting was we need more money for community-led, community-centered Black organizations, grassroots organizations to help people. So we're moving forward on hundreds of millions of dollars of that, including with the Black Endowment Fund, directed by Black philanthropists. We're also moving forward, and I was just meeting with Ahmed Ismail yesterday, because a year ago we launched the $400 million Black entrepreneur strategy, because we know that things like access to capital that is not the same for Black community leaders or entrepreneurs. Banks don't deliver credit and opportunities to Black leaders the way they do to others. That's something we have to fix. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. I learned that from talking with the Black community, that this is something government can do to create equity, to create opportunity, and that's what we're doing. And there is so much more to do.
Can I ask you really one quick question about
Yes.
that Black Entrepreneurship Fund loan? They are loans, and yes, access to capital is so important to build up a business, but why couldn't a portion of that be a grant? Knowing the historical context where generational wealth doesn't exist to the same extent in the Black community compared to other communities. Why couldn't there be a grant portion to that?
Well, for entrepreneurs, first of all, who are getting into for-profit paths, loans are always the right way to do it. And I know that the innovative solutions and the hard work of Black entrepreneurs is going to lead to tremendous success. And that is something that we're happy to do. But on the grant side, that's what we're doing through community organizations. That's what we're doing through Black-led community grassroots philanthropic foundations, to make sure that there is money flowing into those good things that aren't profit driven, that aren't an entrepreneurial launch, because there are so many things that need to be created and opportunities given, that you're absolutely right. We are doing both those tracks.
Okay, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is something we can all agree on needs to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But it also has to start with the basic necessities of life, like clean drinking water. When you were running first to be Prime Minister in 2015, you promised that within 5 years you would end all boil water advisories on reserves. You missed that target, because right now there are 51 still in place. So how can you be trusted on this file?
Well, I mean, you can phrase the numbers that way, or you can phrase them the other way, which is when we took office, there were 105 long-term boil water advisories, and we've lifted 109 of them. Some of them had been in place for decades. Yes, there is more work to do. There are about 51 to go. Every single one of those has a project manager and a team on it, has an action plan on how we're going to end it, and has the funding towards ending it. COVID slowed us down. You can understand that Indigenous communities didn't want people coming in at a time of COVID. People were on lockdown, people were being safe. We lost some time on that, but we are just as committed as we ever were. And the other thing is these—
When will it be finished though? When can you guarantee me that those will be lifted then?
In the coming months and year, absolutely.
So by the end of next year, you're telling me? By the end of 2022?
We're getting them done as quickly as we possibly can. And let me tell you why, because I've gotten criticism from progressives a number of times on why did you make this promise and not be able to achieve it. It's because sometimes you have to have big goals. You know, our government, our bureaucracy, our Indigenous affairs ministries haven't been able to get clean drinking water to people through decades of different governments. And we came in, we said, you're going to get them all done in 5 years. And we did something that nobody has ever even come close to doing, lifting over 100 of them in 5 years. And we now have a path to lifting all of them, and we are going to do that.
Okay. Will you implement all the recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation report, yes or no?
Yes, that's a commitment I made in 2015, and we're well advanced on about 80% of them, and we're finished a whole bunch of them.
When do we expect the next 20% to be implemented?
As soon as we possibly can, but it's, again, not entirely up to us. Reconciliation has to be done in partnership with Indigenous peoples. And that's where all the ones that are the federal responsibility, we are working in co-development. One of them is to get kids out of care, for example.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one because it's been phrased as the modern day residential school system.
Yes.
The amount of Indigenous children in care is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what we've done from about 2017 onwards is work with communities across the country to make sure that we're keeping kids in their communities. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a building of infrastructure, it takes investments in communities so they can properly support those kids at risk. And actually, when I went to Cowessess this spring, which is where unmarked graves were found, and I was grieving with Chief Cadmus Delorme, visiting those graves, we also signed the very first agreement in the country that we'd been working on for years, that we were able to sign that day, that keeps kids at risk in their communities, gets them out of the provincial system, that removes them from language and culture, and gives the care of Indigenous children back to the community. And that's what we're doing across the country. And it can't be done overnight. It has to be done in a way that builds things up. But we did the work on co-developing it and delivering it. So when progressives and even the NDP leader says we've done nothing over the years on reconciliation, that's just being cynical. And we don't need more cynical in politics. Yes, there's more to do. I'm the first to say that. But we need to recognize there have been things done and we need to do more. So I think we have to fall out of that habit of saying, well, if you haven't done 100%, you've done nothing. Well, no, that's not real life for people. Every person you lift out of poverty, every community that lifts a boil water advisory, every kid of the tens of thousands of Indigenous kids who started this school year in new classrooms, in new schools across the country, that is because we have been doing a lot of work. But like I said, there's more to do, and I'm excited about doing the rest. But anyone who says nothing's been done is not just talking down the government for political reasons. They're actually harming the incredibly hard work by millions of Indigenous peoples and Canadians across the country to move the markers forward on a really important issue that has languished for generations.
I got two topics that I want to just address: gun crime and childcare. Those are big issues. Before we get to that, make sure to subscribe to this channel, tap the notification bell, follow us on all the social media. Before I get to those two topics, I do have to ask you this question though, because there was an opinion piece that came out by Jody Wilson-Raybould, your former cabinet minister, this weekend. She kind of revealed and detailed some of the mistreatment she received before resigning. I just want to ask you frankly, just have that open and honest conversation. Do you regret how you handled that situation?
I have lots of regrets, but what she characterizes simply didn't happen. And I don't want to get into a debate back and forth. This was actually something that, Jody spoke at committee. This was analyzed. This all happened well before the last election and was fully litigated and debated around that. I understand that there are hurt feelings there, that we we were people who still believe in a better future for the country, that we're able to work together to do really big things in the first years of our working together. And it's unfortunate when there's a falling out. And I carry a number of things from that. But at the same time, my focus is on working forward on reconciliation for all Indigenous peoples, on building a better justice system for everyone, on moving forward to support people. And that's what I'm going to stay doing.
We've been flooded with so many family members of victims of gun crime. They say that this issue has not made the headlines in mainstream media during this election, and they feel left out of the conversation. So let's bring them into the conversation right now. After 6 years in government, we've seen gun crime statistics go up and down, creeping back up again. What are you going to do to tackle this issue? After some people feel after 6 years, it just hasn't been tackled hard enough.
Thank you for saying not that we've done nothing, but there's more to do. I absolutely agree. But let's remind people, one of the things we did last year was ban military-style assault weapons in Canada. It's now illegal to buy, sell, or use any one of 1,500 different models of military-style assault weapons. That's a commitment we made. We followed through on it, and we're continuing to build on that. The contrast with Erin O'Toole is he's made a deal with the gun lobby to review that ban and bring back those weapons. I know nobody wants that, but we also are very worried about handguns and gun crime there. We have made significant investments in limiting ammunition importation, in lifetime background checks, which is another thing the Conservatives want to weaken, on making sure we're cracking down on illegal and smuggled guns. But we're also moving forward to allow municipalities who want it and also provinces who want it. The province of Quebec has said, we don't want any more handguns in the country. We're going to give them the money to be able to enforce that and support them so that we're doing it. So in Quebec, there are no more handguns. We will continue to work across the country with anyone who wants to limit handguns.
All right, childcare. We have to talk about this. Your $10 a day plan for daycare, very popular. I can admit it. I've heard it on the streets from family members too. And yes, you've made progress. You've signed deals with several provinces across this country to start to implement that plan. However, the most populous province, Ontario, still hasn't signed on. You haven't reached a deal with Ontario. So whose fault is that? Doug Ford's or your fault? Because parents in Ontario pay some of the highest daycare costs in this country.
Yeah, and parents in Ontario need spaces for their kids. They need affordability, and they also need to be able to choose to get back to work when they want to if we want to grow the economy. That's why we're moving forward. So we actually laid out a few key principles that provinces have to meet before moving forward on childcare. $10 a day within 5 years, but cut in half the costs over the next year so that right away parents can see that support. We're putting $30 billion towards that, which also will increase the quality of services by paying better early childhood educators. Those are the things we said. And any province that signs on to agree with that gets massive amounts of federal money to move forward with exactly that, to help grow our economy, to help families.
So what's happening between you guys and Doug Ford in Ontario? Where's the?
We are holding firmly on the $10 a day within 10 years on more public and nonprofit spaces and better pay for educators. And as soon as they agree to those things that are non-negotiable with us, we will move forward to sign with them because families deserve the best motion. Now,
so they want a higher per day cost?
They are not there yet. They want more money for the federal government, and we have the fair level of money out from everywhere. I won't get into the details on negotiating in public, but know that we are there for Ontario. We're very hopeful that Ontario is going to move forward if, of course, we get elected, because Erin O'Toole has promised to reverse our childcare funding. They're going to take that $30 billion we set aside in budget 2021 for $10 a day childcare across the country, 250,000 new spaces across the country, and use it for tax breaks for the wealthy and other priorities of theirs, including funding the oil and gas sector. We know that's not right. We know we have to keep fighting climate change. We know we have to support families. Erin O'Toole's withdrawing of support for childcare will cost families across the GTA and across the country thousands upon thousands of dollars a month. We know how expensive childcare is. It's time we had that. The choice couldn't be clearer right now. We move forward with childcare, or we go back to 1951 with Erin O'Toole. Maybe that's what he means by take Canada back.
You know, I'm going to sneak this last question in, and it's for students, because they were so happy when they got the grace period of not having to pay interest on their student loans during the pandemic. That's being taken away. Why not just make that permanent? Why not just make it permanent?
For someone who read our platform back and forth a few times, Brandon, you seem to have missed the part where we are making interest on student loans gone permanently.
I wanted you to say it though.
I
What's
wanted
that?
to make sure you knew that.
Well, listen, you're not talking to Aaron O'Toole here. What's in my platform, I stand by. I say what I mean. I know my platform, and the numbers actually add up. Not
So when would you
only are we
implement that?
removing interest from student loans, we're making sure you don't have to start paying back your student loans until you're making $50,000 a year. And we're doubling the grants for low-income students to make tuition basically free for them in many parts of the country.
When
know
would that be
we have to
implemented, by
support
the
our
way?
students. What's that?
When would you implement that? Next year? If
That's
you're reelected?
when we get reelected, we'll do that right away.
Okay. I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to that. Really quickly, I asked you last time you were on the show about if you listen to Drake. You told me your kids listen to Drake, but I would love to know, have you listened to his new album CLB? Because you kind of made a little honorary mention in there.
My son Xavier came running up to me. He's like, Dad, Drake mentions you in the new album. I say, yeah, that's true though. He says, no, he said Trudeau. I said, no, but the next line he says true though. It's all good. So we had a good laugh at that.
Okay, I'm glad you know about it. And, I want to say thank you again for taking the time for being on our show, clearing up a few things. I wish we had some more time to go in a bit on those vaccine passports and some of that stuff. But I know you guys
the way through this pandemic is to choose to get vaccinated. And if you make the choice not to, you're putting other people at risk.
I know, but it's the empathy for people who are struggling with the decision.
Huge amounts of empathy. I want to keep them out of emergency room beds as well.
All right. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, thank you so much for coming back on the Brandon Gonez Show. Good luck, and we will see what happens on September 20th.
Everyone's got to get out and vote. This is a really important election with really big choices for people to make.
All right, you take care and be safe, okay?
Thank you.
Whew! Okay, well, that was an interview. We were told we were going to get 15 minutes, but you know me, I stretch it and I try to get everything I can in there. Literally, want to know how you're feeling right now about what Justin Trudeau had to say. Let me know in the comment section. What are your thoughts? I know there's a lot of things that we addressed here. Do you feel like we got to everything? Was there some things that you wish that you heard? Let us know. We want to know how you're feeling. And also remember this, right here at the BG Show, we have the best election coverage. So make sure to keep it locked on the channel. Check our previous videos. We are breaking down all of the parties' platforms so you can find out which is the best party for you to vote for. Also remember this, if you have any news stories or ideas or issues you want us to look into, email us. Oh, there goes my headphones. news@brandongonezshow.com. In the meantime, I need a glass of water, okay? My mouth is dry. So BG will see you very soon. Take care, guys. Love you for watching.